Hello and welcome to the Draft Talk podcast brought to you by 99 Yards. Here on the Draft Talk podcast, we bring you everything you could possibly want for this year's NFL draft, your interviews, your mock draft, scouting reports, and our legendary top fives. And believe it or not, it's finally time to kick off our top five series again. I'm your host, Brian, and I'm delighted to say we've got our tip-top trio of scouts all joining us today. Owen, MJ, and Stu. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah, all good. It's finally here. That we're in the home stretch now because we're getting on to top five and positional preview. So, we're a matter of days, really. You could count down in days. We're at that point, aren't we? So, this is good, and it'd be really good to see the variation here. That we've spoken a lot about this draft class and how it's up and down. This is going to be really interesting as we head towards the draft now and see where we rank these players.
Yeah, as we're recording, I think it's down to 6 weeks until the draft night now, so very exciting times with a lot of stuff to cram in. Lots of twists and turns might happen between now and then as well. Still waiting on trades to happen that we may expect to happen. Players going here and there. It's a bit of a crazy time, and we love it.
Yeah, all good, Brian. Top fives mean, we're getting really close now. Can't wait to dig into some of these position groups and see what the consensus is or where we've got some differences. Should be good fun.
That's optimistic thinking we're going to have a consensus.
It'll be a little bit of consensus.
Maybe a wee bit.
Maybe a little. But yes, it is top five time. If you weren't part of the Draft Talk journey last year, this is how it's going to work. Our wonderful scouts have watched the tape, looked at the measurables, the stats, they've done the works, and have each come up with their top five prospects for each position in this year's draft. We're going to go around the room, go from five up to one being the top, the best, to see who it is that we rate the highest in this year's draft class. And this is our first top five of the year. Very exciting. There's going to be loads of them. And wow, have we got a treat for you. We are kicking off our 2023 Draft Talk top five position series with the wide receivers. Love it. Gotta love them. Even if you've got a few good ones, it doesn't hurt to take a few more. Right, let's get going. Oh, and I'll give you the honour of going first. Who's your number five receiver for this year's draft class?
Okay, so overall, I would say start with that this is a very messy wide receiver class. So this could be really interesting to see because I think the top of this class is ranked. We kind of know the players, but do we know where we're going to rank them? So at number five, I have gone for Tennessee wide receiver JALIN HYATT, and I have to be honest, you're going to see him ranked a lot higher, maybe by a couple of by Stu and MJ, but you're going to see him ranked a lot higher by media as well. Personally, I'm not quite happy about having him in the top five at all, and I think if this was any other receiver class, I can tell you probably won't be. So I'll just start. So JALIN HYATT, Tennessee, won the Biletnikoff Award last season, for the best receiver in college football. A huge, big-time athlete. He was one of those players that we were expecting a lot from at the Combine. Kind of disappointed, even though he ran really quickly, which is just where we've got to the Combine, as we spoke about in the review. Go and check that out if you haven't already. Obviously, fantastic production. He's just all about speed, and more speed. It's absolutely game-changing. He's one of those players who just, you can pin your hat on something. This is how he's going to win, but it is exclusively how he wins. And that's my problem with JALIN HYATT, is that he can only win with speed. He's very restricted in what he can do. His production came in a very, very simple offense at Tennessee that it's quite easy to play in, and all that space is schemed open for him. So you watch the film, he's open all the time, but that space is schemed open for him, and he just has the burners to go out there and hit him. So I don't see much creation from him in terms of creating stuff for himself. And say he struggles in those kind of short distances. He's a long speed runner. He's a deep threat. He really isn't going to win and do much in the short areas. But say he really the headline is speed, field stretcher, elite linear athleticism. He can do some stuff after the catch as well. My problem with him is that I don't think he's much of a separator, and anyone who's done top fives with us before knows that that's what I tend to go for at the receiver position. So number 5 for me, JALIN HYATT from Tennessee.
Okay. First bit of consensus. Snap.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, JALIN HYATT number 5. Absolutely echo what you said. In short, it is as simple as JALIN go long.
Yeah.
And that is his game. As you say, absolutely kind of phenomenal numbers. I think he got about 1,200 yards this season. 700 of those 1,200 yards are on catches of 20 yards plus. He is all about that deep threat. And it is one-dimensional, but I've put him in the top 5 because, quite simply, this game's about touchdowns. How many touchdowns are you going to score? And if you can get him open a couple of times a game, then he could walk off quite easily with a couple of touchdowns. He might only make 2 or 3 catches, but they might be touchdowns. They might be 50, 60-yard touchdowns if you can scheme him open. So it is one-dimensional. As I was looking through this, it was, I think a few weeks ago I started off a little bit higher on him, but going back and looking at it again, he came in as number 5 for me as well.
Stu doesn't have him, 100%.
100% don't have him as 5?
At all.
You're right.
Yeah.
However, number 5 for me, same college.
Okay.
Cedric TILLMAN.
Right.
And that probably is a bit of a surprise for some of you guys. And it surprised me, actually, that he was going to be ranked that highly for me. But I find in a group of receivers, it's really difficult to separate out. Tillman's a little bit different from a lot of the guys this year. He's that bigger type of guy. He's at 6'3", about 210 plus pounds. He's got really good ball control. He's got good at the catch point. He missed most of last year with an ankle injury, but the year before, if you stick him on, I think he's a very good outside receiver. He's got a really long stride length. He's not going to be the quickest off the mark, but once he gets going down that outside, he can churn through the yards very quickly. He's got good hands. He's rock steady at the catch point as well. I think in a wide receiver class, we kind of touched on about there's lots of number 2 receivers. There's lots of slot receivers. I'm not going to say Tillman's going to be a number 1 receiver either, but he's a different option from the other guys. And I just really like that blend of size, body control, and speed. And that's kind of receivers that I've tended to like in the past. So same college, different player.
He's very consistent and reliable, I would say, as a catcher. I don't have his numbers here, but I would be surprised if he had many kind of drops on his box score. He's just kind of a solid, reliable option. Just looking at it, he would have been number 7 for me, so I guess not too far away.
We're not far away.
I like him as well. It's not someone that's been completely forgotten.
Absolutely. I've got after my 5, I've got a whole load of possible 6s and 7s, which tells you something about the draft class. What I like about him, in part, is just that he's different to a lot of these. I mean, looking down the list of receivers that I've looked at, so many of them are like 5'10" and 170 pounds, 5'10", 180 pounds. At least we've got a big-bodied receiver here. As you say, he is very reliable in the catch. His drop rate is very respectable indeed. And he does present a completely different type of receiver to a lot of the others that are mocked to kind of go early, I think. And it will be interesting because not every team needs a 5'10", 170 pound receiver. So I think he'll actually do quite well, and I think there will be a team that needs a receiver of that kind of size and ability in the contested catch. So I think he'll do well. And yeah, good pick there, Stu.
There we go, Cedric TILLMAN and JALIN HYATT filling in our 5th slot there for the guys. MJ, we'll go back to you. Who's your number 4?
Okay, number 4. Here's what I don't know. Maybe we'll start to get some sort of discussion going here. So number 4 for me is Josh Downs. So Josh Downs from North Carolina. He is in the slot kind of 5'970", something like that. And I really liked him when I started to look back. I think he's a very good mover. He is also, though, he's a very good technician, I think, at the position. There is another slot receiver who the guys might have, who has almost identical sort of numbers, who is more of an athlete. Whereas I think that Josh Downs is better at the point of catch. I think he is a player who attacks the ball a bit more. I think he's a little bit more aggressive. And I just think that he's kind of tricky. I'm trying to look for his numbers here that I had up, but where are we? Josh Downs, yeah. He got over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and when you looked at his rating all the way through the field, the kind of passer rating, if you're throwing to Josh Downs, is consistently really, really good. He cut down on his drops this year. He had a problem going into the season with drops. He's absolutely cut that down. And I think he's got a great burst. There are a number of clips of him dumping cornerbacks on the backside. There are, as I say, there are two guys who are around about this height and weight and I'll be interested to see whether you guys have got Josh Downs or whether you've got the other fella who may well get mentioned.
Yeah, so Josh Downs is a player. I think he's what you call a slippery player. Yeah. And that when he's got the ball in his hands, he's difficult to get hold of. And when I mean that, when they get hold of him, he's not got the size to overpower people. He's not knocking people, but he's just difficult for people to get hands on when he has the ball because he's got that elusiveness to him. But he is a small guy, and I think that he's not the strongest guy either. He's going to be very much a slot receiver. Sorry, MG, we're 0 for 2 on top fives because Josh Downs ain't in mine. So we can tell you what we have very different ideas on wide receivers. It's not that anyone's is better. We just have different opinions on people. But yeah, we're 0 for 2, mate.
I don't have him either. He was 6, and when I said that I didn't really want Jalin Hyatt in it, he would have been the guy that I would have put ahead. So he was at 6, and it would say it's very, very close between him and Jalin Hyatt for that 5 spot. So I do completely understand where you've come from there, MJ. I think the best way to describe him is he's almost got a skill set of a running back, but as a receiver, and that's not to give him his due because he is a receiver and he's much better than that, but he's almost, just the way that he runs, the way that he's elusive, and like you said, Stu, like he's slippery. His change of direction is absolutely exceptional. You turn on the tape and it's just, there's a lot on there, but there's a lot of checkdowns. There's a lot of kind of options over to him because if you get the ball in his hands, he's going to make something happen. So I can completely understand. I think going deep as well because of his size, it might not be something that teams overly look to do, but his ball tracking is really, really good. That's something that really stood out to me. And now he's cut down on those drops. That's really going to help. So yeah, he's a dynamic weapon. He's more than a receiver. He can do a bit of everything for you.
Good stuff. Owain, let's see who your number 4 is, please.
Yeah, so copy and paste what I just said about Josh Downs, because my number 4 is Zay Flowers from Boston College, and I think you can apply basically everything that we've just said about Josh Downs over to Zay Flowers. Very similar in size to Josh Downs, so there's about an inch between them, about 5 or 6 pounds, so not a lot. So this is the kind of the smaller, shiftier, craftier receiver, great athlete. And what I would say that epitomizes Zay Flowers more, he plays everything at 100 miles an hour, and not just in speed, but in change of direction, in thought. He's just absolutely electric. He's a big play waiting to happen. So he's super explosive, got great juice and burst. His acceleration after the catch is great as well. It's just he is a pure separator. Vision's great as well when you get the ball in his hands. I just think he has a bit of everything for that smaller slot receiver that you want. Breaks tackles, great contact balance. He's got. I think he has more strength than Josh Downs, which is why what puts him ahead. But I think he's someone who will set the tone for a receiver group, that you put him in there, and all of a sudden everyone else has to elevate, because he plays the game so quickly, and he gets so much out of it. It's just so twitchy that I think he would be a great addition. He does have some drops on tape, and I think that was more concentration rather than anything else. He's already thinking ahead, because he's so sharp that he's already thinking, what can I do when I get the ball in my hands? And I think he maybe could control his pace a little better at times, because he is so explosive. But his skill set is absolutely there, and he will be extremely productive, probably out of the slot, but he could play on the outside if you wanted him to. Just get the ball in his hands however you can.
Yeah, and I think for me, that bit you've just mentioned at the very end there about he can play on the outside if he has to. He's done that a little bit as well. I think he is someone who, when he sees the open field, he's got really good awareness of what's around him and what angles to take as well. Not just straight line. I'm just going straight for the end zone. If there's another way to get there with cutting off angles of DBs. His change of direction is really very good as well. He has that stop on a dime and go somewhere else very, very quickly. I think he is an explosive, dynamic player, and I would love to have him on the team. I'm even higher than you are, Owen. I've got him as number 3.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into who is my number 3, but if you go and look at my big board that came out, they are number 4, who is Zay Flowers, and whoever's my number 3 are right next to each other. So there's just one space ahead. So I found it very difficult to split the two of them.
Yes. So and this may well sound odd, but when I was putting my 5 together, I didn't want 5 that were very, very similar players.
Yeah.
So I think when I was thinking about 4, it was either Josh Downs or Zay Flowers. I wanted to get JALIN HYATT in there because he was a different sort of player. I will. This is like the first of these things. I will die on the Josh Downs over Zay Flowers hill.
That's fine.
We won't lynch you for that one. It's all right.
But it is amazing how they're very, very similar, and I do wonder how linked their careers might be, because they are very similar sorts of players. I think the one thing I would say about Zay Flowers is, he absolutely carried that Boston College offense. And you're right. He was asked to play on the outside 66% of his snaps, whereas you see him more translating into more of his snaps are going to be in the slot, definitely. I think he's possibly more reliant on the timing of the routes. There are a number of routes where if the timing is absolutely spot on, and he had to deal with some dodgy quarterback play last year as well. If the timing of those routes is spot on, then yeah, he is gone. I think you have to put the ball on him a bit more than Josh Downs, but there's no doubt that he's very, very dynamic as a player, and probably a tad better athlete, just about. But I put him in the athlete category a little bit more than technician, and I think he's got, as you say, there are a few drops, as you say, they're probably concentration drops, probably the hang on a minute. If I catch this, I've just got to get past that player, and then I'm like 30 yards down the field, and I'm away. So great player, but yeah, haven't got him in my 5, and I'll be interested to see how the Josh Downs versus Zay Flowers debate goes after the draft.
Oh yeah, good. So I think I've still got number 4 to go.
You have indeed.
So my number 4, and I might be a bit lower than you guys. I obviously am, because I think he's going to be in your top 3. Is Quentin Johnson. He's my number 4 wide receiver. He's a lot of hype. A lot of people have him as the number 1 wide receiver, and I like him. It's not saying I don't like Quentin Johnson. I'm just not sold on Quentin Johnson being that A1 top guy to be picked in the draft. He's got great size. He's 6'4". He's that round about that 210, 215 size. Huge catch radius. He can come down with the ball very easily. I just don't think he's as polished as some of the other guys. I think that his route running is a bit loose. I don't think he has that kind of tight, sharp kind of turns that he maybe needs to. he's strong and he's physical, but I sometimes think he doesn't use that as well as he could at times against other people as well. And sometimes he does. He seems to go. I mean, I don't know whether that's just the TCU offense, but he's not there for the whole game. He doesn't seem to dominate and take over a game like you would maybe want or expect him to do. So I still think he's a very good wide receiver, and he's going to do very well at the NFL level immediately, just because of that size and that ability to get the ball. Teams are going to feed him it when they need an out. But he was my fourth guy. There's just a few players I like a bit more than Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, I might piggyback off this just because it makes sense that Quentin Johnston's my number 3. So I was saying that I have Quentin Johnston ranked literally one place ahead of Zay Flowers on a big board. So I see them quite similarly. What gave Quentin Johnston the edge for me is just because he is very different to everything else that's on the table here at the receiver position. So kind of if you can hit on Quentin Johnston, the upside of that it probably is bigger than the upside of Zay Flowers, just because of what he can do because of his size. Say he's just an absolute monster, isn't he? Got 6'4", 210 pounds or so, elite height, length, extremely physical as well, able to beat press because of that physical profile. That length gives him a ridiculous catch radius. He comes down with the ball extremely well, but he's more than a contested catch guy. He is a kind of a contested catch specialist, but he can also create and he can separate. His strength just gives him a lot of leverage, I think, in terms of beating the press and then going up and catching the ball. And I think he has probably underrated explosiveness and speed for that size. You'd expect him to be a bit slower, and he's not. My problem with Quentin Johnston and why he's I would say. I do tend to be a bit lower on him than, even though he's number 3, because a big board he's way down. Some people have him ranked as a top 20 player. He's early 30s, hit between him and Zay Flowers. I just think his route tree needs to become a lot more diverse and refined. He's taken catches a lot of his usage just been a little bit sporadic. A couple of years ago he was catching passes out the backfield and you kind of think, what the hell's going on here? But he can create after the catch. He's not elusive because of that size. You're not going to expect him to be, but he isn't polished. He's going to need a lot of work, and so people are going to say that he can be a wide receiver 1 for someone. I'm not sure I would trust him to be that on day one entering the league. I would quite like him to be in a room and then potentially move off onto him at some point over the next couple of years. But if you can get the best out of Quentin Johnston, there's absolutely no question that you're going to have a great outside wide receiver.
So yeah, just to round it off on Quentin Johnston, I've got him at 2, which shows that we've got him in three different spots there, and part of it is because he's a complete unicorn in terms of this draft. He should be in this draft class of receivers. He should be absolutely like slam dunking this as I am wide receiver 1, and yet all of those questions that you've mentioned apply. He's the size that he is, and yet he did not dominate for that TCU offense. And you wonder, looking at his stats, if TCU hadn't had such a good year, would we be talking about Quentin Johnston as much off the back of those stats? I think you're right, Stu. He does tend to go missing now. Whether that's because he ended up being a bit of a decoy on that offense, you're going to put guys on him. You're going to double up there, aren't you? But 5 games he was less than 50 yards. 9 games he was 7 or fewer targets. And certainly in the championship game against Georgia, I mean, I think it was Kelly Ringo was on him, and he shut him down completely there. So it should all be there. The athleticism, just that height, weight, frame combination should make him somebody who is towering over cornerbacks and a real mismatch and a red zone weapon. So he should translate into the NFL, but there are just some question marks about him. But in this particular draft class, because he is completely different to the rest, that's why I'd got him up at number 2.
There we go. So you got it number 2. MJ,
keeping track there, Brian.
I've got a little colour coding system.
I've totally lost them.
So I've got red and yellow. Maybe I need like an amber as well. Anyway, MJ, while you're kind of still there, give us your number 3.
Yep.
We've not, yeah.
Okay, so number 3 is Jordan Addison from USC. So back to another guy where it's about his route running ability. He's another technician. I think the comp here, because I've been looking through some of the stats, is around that kind of Devonta Smith sort of height, well, the frame anyway. And his 40 time was roughly the same as Devonta Smith. And I was concerned when Devonta Smith came out about whether he would have the ability to move to the NFL and just stand up to the kind of more rugged week in, week out defenses that he'd come up against. And obviously that has worked. I do really like Jordan Addison. I think that he obviously went from Pittsburgh to USC. And he ended up playing more on the outside at USC, whereas for Pittsburgh, he was definitely a slot receiver. And him and Kenny Pickett matched up for 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns that season. And his stats were a bit down when he went to USC, but he's playing in a different role. So I think a team will look at him, and again, he is somebody who should probably be seeing most of his time in the slot. But he's got great separation through the route running. He understands the position, and I think he will be really good in that spot. But yeah, I've got him coming in at number 3.
I could see the steam coming out of Owen's ears there at 3. But yeah, I'm going to have a bit less steam coming out of his ears because I've got Jordan Addison as my number 2. Echoing a lot for MJ. I think I know why Wayne is probably going to have him higher than that, but we'll leave it to that. Is the separation issue, as an issue for defensive backs, not for Jordan Addison, because Jordan Addison is someone who separates consistently well. He works really well, also kind of at the release and at the top of his routes in deceiving defensive backs, moving shiftily so that they're kind of off the scent of where he's going. He's got decent enough hands. He has had some drops at Pittsburgh, but that doesn't seem so bad since he's been at USC. He's played, people have him marked as a slot receiver, but I think he's good enough to play on the outside. I think he's got the ability to use that route running to separate well enough to make up for whatever lack of size, and he does lack size. He came in really small at the combine. It was 173, I think he was, which is light, but I think he's got enough route running ability, ball skills, run after the catch, twitchy agility that I think he can make up, like Devonta Smith has done. I don't think they're the same player, but they've got that same frame. They've used their nous and their ability to overcome that at the next level, and I think Jordan Addison could do exactly the same.
Yeah, I might as well touch on him. He is my number 1. Jordan Addison is my number 1. I really, really, really do like him. Yes, the size and the stature isn't ideal. I do think he plays much bigger than his size, though. I don't think it's a huge factor when he's actually on the field. Yes, he does work best over the, if you ideal role, he does work best over the middle because that's where he can create that kind of elite separation ability that he has. He can work well on the outside. Just because he is a bit shorter, maybe he doesn't have that huge contested catch ability that Quentin Johnston has, and he did have 10 drops in his 2 seasons at Pittsburgh. I'm not sure what his stats were at USC, but that was a little bit of a factor there. But he's just a player who's open all of the time, and despite not having that ideal size profile, he's got good length. So he isn't kind of, his arm length is good. He does have a really nice catch radius. It's just extremely twitchy. We thought he might have been a better tester than he was, but I'm not overly concerned by it because he's just open all the time on the field. It's because you ran slightly slower than we thought at the combine. I'm not hugely, he's fallen maybe a little bit because you kind of go, well, that wasn't expected, but he's just so good when he's on the field. Footwork as well, he's got that kind of quick footwork, which allows him to gain extra yards, and he can make a defender miss because of how twitchy he is. He's kind of got all those nuances in his route running. Slippery, can evade tackles as well when someone does get near him. Sticky hands, can pull the ball away from anywhere because of that length. I think he could even he could return kicks for you if you wanted him to. I really like Jordan Addison. That's why he's my number one. And yeah, I've been on him since the summer. I just don't see him not being able to succeed in the NFL, because yes, you put him on the outside, but you just, if it's not working, you can just manipulate it and get him in the slot and get him over the middle. So I just don't see a way where he isn't a success.
Lovely stuff. You've gone with one. Who's we're missing your number two then, Owain? Who you might be able to guess who it is.
Well, maybe they should go with if they have him at number one.
Yeah, so
I mean, thank you.
Yeah, that is a gentlemanly thing to do. It won't last. Yeah, so for me, JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba is wide receiver one, and I don't really care that he didn't play that much in 2022. 2021, Big Ten receiving record. He is just smooth as silk. He is a really smooth football player. Everything he does has a bit of polish to it. He's really refined. He has great awareness around him. He's got his hand skills, ball skills, focusing at the catch point. He doesn't drop anything. He's got great vision around him once he's made that catch. He is a route runner savant. He's a separator. He doesn't have that elite level athleticism that some of these other guys do. But his technique is that good that he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to out-athlete people. I can see him being, it's not a player comparison in any way, shape or form, the type of guy who ends up getting Justin Jefferson volume as a receiver at the next level if he's in the right situation. He's just so reliable. He's open all the time. He's got great body control. I could just see him producing 1,000-yard season upon 1,000-yard season, injury permitting. We don't know how quick he is because he hasn't done his 40-yard dash, and to be honest, I don't care that much. I think he will. Whether he's going to be the first receiver off the board, I don't know. It depends on what teams are looking for and what they already have. But for me, I think he is a receiver who's going to do really well. And when he was in a wide receiver room with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and they both said he was the best receiver in that room at that time, and we've seen how well they've done at the NFL level, I can see him being a big success.
Yep, so he's my wide receiver one as well. It is a little bit of a leap of faith because we don't really have any tape from last year because he was injured. It's just a couple of games, but the 2021 stuff, as you said, the stats were magnificent given the company he was in. I think what tipped it for me in the end was actually seeing him back out at the combine, and seeing him, do some of those catching drills, and it was just incredibly smooth. I mean, he makes catching that ball look easy, and he's a great mover. He did show that he has got some good athleticism. I mean, the stats that he did get, his 3-cone was the best of the wide receivers, and his 20-yard shuttle was the best of the wide receivers. And we're talking by a decent amount. The 3-cone was 6.57, and the next one was 6.85. The 20-yard was 3.93, and the next was 4.12. So he came out and demonstrated that he has got good athleticism. But yeah, I like a technician, a craftsman at this position, and I think that's exactly what it is. He makes it look simple, and yeah, for me, he's back up there. So he was wide receiver one.
Yeah, so I suppose round it out, he was number two for me. I did have Jordan Addison ahead of him, but I agree with what the guys have said there. He just is a guy who just seems to do everything right. He's just so savvy. His route running is fantastic, really crafty during his routes. Proper nuance to manipulate defenders. Space finder both during the route and after, if that kind of makes sense. He's able to create the separation, but then once he's got the ball, he does have that kind of quickness in his footwork to create that yard of separation to get going again. I do think he is pretty tricky after the catch as well. For the, we're saying he's maybe potentially got a lack of athleticism. I do think he is tricky enough after the catch. Really good stop-start ability, can change his pace up really nicely. He doesn't have that top gear, but he can go through kind of first, second, third quite nicely. My problem is I do think it can be a bit too easy to tackle at times, and that maybe comes from a lack of strength profile. He obviously isn't overly explosive, and kind of what puts Jordan Addison ahead of him for me is that I think Jordan Addison's potentially a little bit more sudden on tape. I know that maybe the testing numbers don't show that, but that's kind of how it appears to me. And say lacking that top end speed, and yet say I do think he probably is a guy who will operate almost exclusively over the middle at the next level. I think you can probably do a job at the outside, but I think if you leave him there, then you're probably doing him a bit of disservice, and you're not using him to the best of his ability. Although, yes, he can do a job there, but if you're, say, like Stu was saying, if you can get 1,000-yard seasons, I think that will come from the middle and just getting him the ball, because he might be the most intelligent receiver on this list, because he's just extremely clever in knowing, he almost knows what the defender's going to do before they've even reacted to anything. He can just work the field that well. So yeah, I'm personally, I do think he'll be the first receiver off the board. That I would be surprised if he's not, because I think of where we expect the receivers to go, kind of he's that perfect second or third option on a receiver group, not obviously at the position.
There we go. Well, we'll do a quick recap, and then we'll talk about a few guys who missed it. So, MJ, remind the lovely listeners of your top 5 receivers.
Okay, so at number 5, I had JALIN HYATT from Tennessee. Number 4, Josh Downs from North Carolina. Number 3, Jordan Addison from USC. Number 2, Quentin Johnston from TCU. And number 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State.
Align, do you want to go?
Yeah, so 5 was JALIN HYATT, 4 was Zay Flowers, 3 was Quentin Johnston, 2 Jackson Smith-Njigba, and number 1 was Jordan Addison.
Oh, you're on mute, Stu.
Oh no, I never do that.
It was going so well.
Yeah, I know. It's usually me to mess it up. I almost had to get the expletive onto our podcast.
As long as you're on mute.
Yeah, exactly. So 5 I had Cedric Tillman, 4 was Quentin Johnson, 3 Zay Flowers, 2 Jordan Addison, and number 1 JSN Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State.
Fantastic stuff. Well, yeah, that's our top 5. So you, the listeners, want to hear what you're saying. So we're going to put a poll out on Twitter. My math says, yeah, there's 4 different guys who got votes within the top 3: Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. We'll put them on there. Vote for your favourite. It'll be good to get your opinion too. So there's our top 5 guys, but there's plenty of good receivers in this class. You mentioned guys who were sort of 6, 7, 8. Throw a few names out there. Who else are we pretty high on this year?
Yeah, so number 6 for me would have been Josh Downs. He just missed out. 7 would have been Tillman. The next guy for me would be Marvin Mims, who I think is going a little bit slept on during the process. Again, another smaller guy, but extremely consistent and reliable. I would look for him potentially going on day 2. And then you've kind of just got a cluster of fast guys or contested catch guys or smaller guys. It's kind of how you can pick kind of what type you want, whatever kind of your team is after. If you're after like a crafty slot guy, there's going to be plenty of them. The same as if you just want a contested catch guy, you're going to be able to get one. You are maybe just holding on a little bit though.
Yeah, just one guy I wanted to touch on, and I think we spoke about him a lot in the summer, and he's disappeared off, is Kayshon Boutte. He had a very much a down year for LSU this year. There was a few issues going on there. I'm not really quite sure of all the details of that. But if he gets it right, he could be a steal for somebody. When we saw him at his best, he has that big playability. He can play as a vertical threat. He's got that in his game. It's whether someone wants to take a flyer on him, get him focused, and get him playing right. Because in the summertime, he was right up there with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jordan Addison's in this group, and he's fallen off the face of the earth a little bit. But could he have a wee bit of a bounce back?
How do you rank him? I suppose that's a debate for another day, but it's extremely
almost
difficult to know
impossible
where you rank him.
Yeah, if you rank him on this year, he's doof off the board.
Yeah.
If you rank him on the year before, he's top 3. It's just I think interviews and whatnot is going to have a lot to do with how teams receive him, because he tested reasonably well. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible. So he's somebody that I think you might want to take a chance on if you've got a lot of picks. In that day 2, kind of late day 2, if you've got a shed load of picks, a flyer on Keishon Butte is not a bad idea.
Yeah, I can see why you could almost, like when you're ranking players, that you don't want to put them at the top because you're almost certain to kind of, you're setting yourself up for a bust on your resume there, aren't you? But then if you rank him right down at the bottom, you're potentially going to look silly because of how good he could be. So it's really difficult it's a very fine line to know where to rank him.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and echo what you said about Marvin Mims. I got a few notes on him. He was averaging about 20 yards per reception this year in a 1,000-yard season, and he holds the Texas high school record for yardage, both single season and career. So he is definitely an explosive playmaker. And then one other name of a guy I've just tracked for a while now, just interested to see where he goes, because Rashee Rice from SMU, he's got kind of... It sounds like I'm doing him a disservice to say he's got a number of average traits, but he could be a really reliable contested catch receiver. He's got good mentality. He's got that kind of alpha mentality going up for the ball. Good for jump balls downfield. Good physicality, and I'll be interested to see where he goes because he had some good production in college.
Lovely stuff. Well, there we go. That's the wide receiver top 5's done. Say top 5. We've got about 8 in there, didn't we? So plus many more.
We could have a few more if you want.
No, let's not. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. That's it. That's our first of our top 5. Very exciting. We'll be back in a couple of days with our next episode. In the meantime, you know what to do. Get on the website, 99yards.com. Get on our Twitter, @99yards. Make sure you vote in the poll, of course. And we'll see you next week for more Draft Talk.